Federal agents detained yet another immigrant living in the U.S. on a student visa. This time, a Turkish national and Tufts University doctoral student, Roomaysah Ozturk, was the target.
Surveillance video from Tuesday shows the moment that masked Homeland Security agents swooped in and arrested Ozturk. She had just left her Somerville, Massachusetts home to go break fast for Ramadan.
According to the Associated Press, a DHS spokesperson confirmed Ozturk's detention and the termination of her visa. In a statement, the agency alleged Ozturk was engaged in activities supportive of Hamas. Her friends refute this. Ozturk's friends did tell the AP that she contributed to an op-ed in the Tufts Daily a year ago. The op-ed criticized Tufts' response to last year's pro-Palestinian protests, and it called on the university to divest investments with ties to Israel.
The AP reported that a pro-Israel website called Canary Mission caught wind of her writing and published her name, photo, and work history. The site says it is dedicated to rooting out and exposing anyone against Israel.
Ozturk's arrest comes amid a wave of student visas being revoked for individuals who have been critical of Israel. The Trump administration claims these individuals support terrorism and terrorists. Ozturk is currently detained in Louisiana.
Look, I think it's obviously quite disturbing to watch someone grabbed on the street by masked men who, yes, were police officers, although ICE agents. That wasn't known to her and wasn't clear. They didn't identify them as such. They didn't have any identification. You know, I always think about this when, for instance, when police do no-knock raids, they break into your home, and sometimes with the wrong address. You know, what if you fight back thinking you're just being robbed or mugged or assaulted, then you're going to end up being, in addition to whatever other trouble you're in, you're going to end up being charged with assaulting a police officer. So I think it is pretty incumbent on them to clearly identify themselves, especially in this situation where there was really no reason not to. Then additionally, I just don't like the idea of people being grabbed off the street and sent to detention facilities for what, in this case, really seems to be just speech, that she wrote an op-ed critical of Israel. Again, I don't think Trump supporters, we were voting for Trump because we wanted more just routine violations of people's due process and free expression rights. So I think this is a very worrying direction for the government to be going. You know, people who are here in this country under student visas or green cards, et cetera, might not have all the exact same rights as citizens, and the government can review their them being in this country and whether that is in the government's best interest or in accordance with our policies. But I would certainly want them to go through a court process to determine that, not just determine it behind closed doors and then grab people. That seems really prone to error and abuse to me.
Yeah, and there's so many things wrong with what we're seeing in this particular moment with this particular case, not the least of which, so far, the lack of transparency about why on earth would you send what we believe are 6 ununiformed officers with, masks over their face to grab a young lady. As a mom, if this were my daughter, you would never hear the end of it from me. And in fact, in some of the footage, you can hear people in the background saying, how do we know that you're ICE agents? I mean, they literally could just be not so great people who are just grabbing a young lady off the street. So what is it that makes you think a Fulbright scholar who's here legally on a student visa needs to be detained this way?
Yeah. And again, and literally, what is it? Make the case. I'm listening. I'm all ears. I get that there is some conflict in the law and decisions that have been made about what kind of rights and protections people who are not citizens have, although I always remind people that in general, the Bill of Rights our constitutional system restricts government action rather than affirmatively saying, so and such person gets these rights. It says the government may not do X, Y, and Z. So courts have held that thus then applies to just people who are in the country because it's restraining our government from behavior we think is bad. And also, even if you say then that non-citizens don't have XYZ rights, well, how do we know they're not citizens without going through the due process or the investigatory process to then determine that, okay, this is someone we can legally detain and deport who is not entitled to whatever? Well, they have to prove that, right? It's not It's not you. We don't have to. We don't all walk through the streets at all times having to prove to the government that we are citizens and deserve to be here and deserve our rights. Right? The government has to. The presumption is on the government. They have to prove that they can do X, Y, or Z thing to you.
Right.
So I don't. When people are like, "Oh, we can't let due process get in the way of national security," but then they could just disappear you if there's no due process.
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. And what is really troubling here leads me to the political analysis is that if you agree that an American-born student who wrote the same op-ed should not be subject to this type of treatment, then it raises all kinds of questions about, well, then why are you doing this at all, if not for trying to make an example out of someone you feel like disagrees with policies that you're promoting?
Yeah, and what the government has said about this so far is just not at all comforting to me. They've said things like, well, we're targeting foreign-born students who are here because their advocacy is contrary to U.S. national security interests. Like what, their advocacy against a foreign government?
Right.
Like, I don't agree with these students at all. Hamas is a terrorist group. I think it is loathsome and contemptible. These students, including some large student activist groups that, in my view, clearly aligned them or celebrated the actions taken by Hamas, said that what happened on October 7th was a good thing. I think that is absolutely horrific. And if you want to, prevent people from coming to the country who think that way, certainly I agree that the government can do that. But when they're here, we prize our First Amendment very much. And I think and there is debate about what our policy should be with respect to the Middle East on both the right and the left. It's not clear to me how it can be a blow to our national security to have people expressing opposition to what Israel is doing in Gaza. That's not even our national security. It's not our nation. It's halfway across the world. So that's weird to me too. And then the whole, it just seems like
there's a human rights element to this, right? We know that more than 40,000 Palestinians have lost their lives. And I do think that you can be pro the Palestinian people and anti-Hamas.
Right.
So the very fact that you would conflate, not you specifically, but the person in the discussion would conflate those two things, I think is troubling in and of itself. And then to your point, Robby, you should be able to express what you think without fear of some masked men dragging you off the street.
Like the Trump administration, initially, they put pressure on Netanyahu to make a deal with Hamas to free the hostages.
In January.
Yes. So what if we had some Israeli students here on student visas or whatever it is, writing op-eds or doing protesting in the streets against that decision, saying, how dare the Trump administration urge the Israeli government to make a deal with terrorists? Would people be arrested? Would the government be grabbing them and saying that's contrary to our national security interest to let them dissent and express that perspective? I think we would all obviously recognize that that's insane.
Right.
So it's the exact same thing. There should be robust debate on this subject. There should not be occupying of buildings and disruption of normal, student body functioning at Columbia or elsewhere. If they're breaking actual laws, it's a different thing. But no one is making that argument in these cases, and yet these people are being, detained. They're being moved to Louisiana.
And we know why.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good. It's my view. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Pennsylvania Democrats, next up, did what many thought would be quite difficult. We'll tell you what that is. Stay tuned.